Welcome back to our final lesson about labels. Here we're going to talk about AC hazards and then do a quick label summary. So the NEC has a few requirements for AC hazard labels. Now we're just going to scratch the surface here, but section 110.16 has requirements for an arc flash hazard warning label like that's shown on the right. These labels are required if the equipment is examined, adjusted, serviced, or maintained while energized. So working on energized equipment does happen, and you must be a qualified person to do so. Note, this label does not require a calculated maximum of available fault current, and that is certainly beyond the scope of this course. But if you're more interested in some arc flash, learning more about arc flash hazards, etc., I suggest you take an NFPA 70E course. Yeah, so we're not going to get into calculating available fault current in this course. This arc flash hazard warning label does not apply to dwelling units. So it's really only in the larger commercial setting, that type of thing. A few things about the arc flash or shock hazard label is it tells you what type of PPE is required. It shows you the hazard category of PPE. It also shows you a minimum working distance and what type of insulating gloves one must wear if they're within that arc flash hazard boundary. Another label that's required in 110.24a is the available fault current. And basically the field marking of the maximum available fault current must be on the service equipment. Oftentimes it exists in, again, the commercial realm, larger buildings, but not really in the residential sector. Yeah, this label only applies to service equipment greater than or equal to 1200 amps, 1200 amps, and the field marking of maximum available fault current isn't required in industrial installations where only qualified persons will be working on that service equipment. So again, I don't think this really applies. Yeah, it doesn't apply to dwelling units. This is stuff you're going to see more on commercial buildings. A lot of times these labels exist already, or they certainly should, and these are both AC labels. Okay, now we're going to wrap it up. Here's our sample PV system labeling slide. Now, these labels are required or may be required on the DC side. Label 1, photovoltaic power source. That's the label or sticker for conduit, raceways, junction boxes, basically any DC circuit that's in or on a building. Label number 2, maximum DC voltage. That's only required at a single location. Maybe it's on an external DC disconnect. Maybe it's just on the inverter. And then label 3 is one of the warning electric shock hazard labels. Specifically, that's the line and load side may be energized. Again, we think this is only, well, we say this label is only required when it's actually true, and that's going to be on the DC side. So here we have the label placed on the external DC disconnect or at the inverter with an integral DC disconnect. Again, you might have to talk to the inverter manufacturer and ask about the capacitors on the DC side. How long do they remain energized and discharge voltage that would make the load side of a disconnect live? This slide and the following slide, which is this one on the AC side, these are really just for your reference. This goes through all the labels required on the AC side, and you might notice there's quite a few of them. Label 4 is our PV system disconnect. That's only required at the designated PV system disconnect. Then the dual power source. Second source is a solar PV system. That's in the AC service panel or the point of interconnection. Then our labels identified as number 6 are only required if one of those methods from 705.12 are used. I'll use my laser pointer. On the left is the label for what we call the AC combiner panel. On the right is the label if you're using the 120% rule and you have a breaker in a load center, and that's your point of interconnection. And then label number 7 is pretty self-explanatory. That's for the rapid shutdown switch. That's only required if rapid shutdown is present. And label 8 is again a diagram showing that the PV system is equipped with rapid shutdown, and it's indicating the location of the rapid shutdown initiation device. And label 9 is showing that there are multiple sources of power, and it includes a diagram, and that is also in Article 705. So that's a quick look at our labeling summary. Again, please review both the requirements for DC side and AC side. Understand what your HJ requires, because they might do some things different than what the NEC says. And I also encourage you to not label every single thing, right? Try to keep labels to a minimum so as we don't confuse people, because that's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to add more labels to a system. We're trying to make it more clear of the safety hazards and what specific equipment is. So I urge you to do the same in your installations. That's it for this lesson on labeling, folks. Thanks, and I hope to see some of you someday at our beautiful lab yard out there in Paonia, Colorado. Stay safe, folks.